Welcome to Mastering the Art of Success. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio. I am here today with Jeff C. West. Don't forget the C, else you will not get my Jeff C. West.
True.
Welcome, Jeff C.
Oh, thank you so much, Debbie. It's an honor to be on your show today.
Wow, it's an honor to have you. And you were introduced to me by the one and only Bob Burg. So I am just so grateful today for both you and Bob. So we are going to do a little slideshow as I properly introduce you, and then we're going to dig right in. And I'm sure the hour is going to fly by. So, Jeff C. West, acclaimed author of business parables such as The Unexpected Tour Guide, said the lady with the blue hair, co-authored with Lisa M. Wilber, and Streetwise to Saleswise, co-authored with Bob Burg, has turned storytelling into a tool for professional and personal growth. These works have collectively earned 6 distinguished awards, much to Jeff's delight and perhaps to the amazement of his former college English professors. His latest book, The Hidden Heist: Stop Robbing Yourself of Lasting Wealth, co-authored with Bill Gates, is already creating buzz and getting rave reviews. Bob Burg, co-author The Go-Giver, said, "Think a Netflix thriller meets the only money guide you'll ever need. I couldn't put it down." And Tammy Lally, the money coach, TED speaker, and author of Money Detox, said, "The Hidden Heist takes you on a thrilling journey while teaching invaluable lessons about money and life, a truly refreshing approach to financial literacy." Before turning to writing, Jeff built a sales and leadership career spanning more than 30 years across a range of sectors, from musical instruments to employee benefit programs, leading teams to over 150 million in recurring revenue sales. He lives in Texas, where he once played professionally in a Dixieland band because, as Jeff contends, everyone loves the tuba player. He is an internationally recognized expert in the field of sales and sales team leadership and has appeared as a guest on hundreds of live shows and podcasts. He's spoken for major brands at conferences across the US and has also been a quoted source for publications such as Sales and Marketing Management Magazine, the National Federation of Independent Business, and Peak Sales Recruiting. For over 30 years, Jeff has coached and led sales teams in multiple industries and was among the top sales performers and leaders in the nation. For over 20 years, he was an entrepreneur in field sales management with a nationally recognized Fortune 200 insurance company, including being a President's Club qualifying state sales coordinator for Southeast Texas. Wow, you have accomplished quite a bit, Mr. Jeff C. West.
Oh, you're very kind, and that intro makes me sound really good. Thank you.
So I always start with the same question. I'm a very visual person, and I want to know where you were raised and what got you, a little bit about your journey. And then when you were growing up or when you were looking for a career, did you know where you were looking to go, or did you just arrive here through happenstance?
Oh, that's such a great question. I actually grew up a mile and a half down a dirt road in a little small town in North Georgia. Uh, it's a little town called Dalton, actually. Still have friends and family there to this day, but no, I didn't have your normal uh, pathway to a sales career. It was kind of odd. I actually had originally planned to be a band director, then a film score composer. I have a master's degree in music composition and a bachelor's degree in music education. And by the way, those 2 degrees and a $10 bill will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So
Not
it's been
very
very
lucrative.
fruitful. Right. Well, when I finished my master's degree, I needed to work at the college town where my wife was finishing up her degree, got married in the middle of the master's degree, and there were no teaching jobs open. And so I accidentally ended up in sales. I say accidentally then, but now I look back and it was divine providence on my part. And I was immediately making so much more money than I would make teaching that I just stayed in that direction. And I worked for a company in Alabama in musical instrument sales, and then did well, got promoted pretty quickly. And then I ended going into the industry of industrial uniforms. That's how I actually ended up in Texas. The uniform company, I was one of their top 3 salesmen in the nation. and there was a new branch opening up in Texas, and they offered me the position to be the head of that branch, so I took it. And then about a year and a half later, we got bought by another company, and that did not work out well for Jeff. I stayed with them for a while, but it was not a good fit. And it's so funny, Debbie. At the time, I blamed them, but the truth is, I'm the one that shaves my face. It's always my responsibility on everything. And so, anyway, I left that, and that's when I went into the insurance industry. And that is where I've spent the rest of my career until I retired at age 54, which it was about almost 12 years ago now. And that's when I began writing and speaking and doing things that really now have put me in such a happy place. I've always been happy,
Oh,
I think, at what I was doing, but this one's special. It really is.
I agree. It's so fun to do that. And I think when you're coaching or speaking and giving back after you've had a career, it is so fulfilling. It's kind of, I still practice real estate, but it's like, I don't know if it's a disease or something. I just want to keep helping and mentoring people.
Oh, yeah,
It,
well, that
it
says
just,
so much about you. You're putting good out there in the universe when you do that, but it's very rewarding when someone tells you that something you did, that you coached them on, that you wrote, that you mentored them on. When someone tells you that it made a change in their world, and they go into detail, it's humbling. I'm a big sap. It brings tears to my eyes, but I try not to let people see it too much. So.
I agree. I agree 100%. I think that is so true. Okay, so before the show, we have to bring Bob Burg into this. So before the show, we were talking about your career in, I believe, insurance, one of your sales careers. You said you massively pivoted and your career just changed. So tell us about your experience meeting Bob and experience and what really changed to make you just do so well.
Oh, thank you for the question. I had been with the insurance carrier that I was with at this point. It was January of 2000, so I'd been with them about six and a half years, and I had already been a district manager for 6 years. And I was one of those district managers that I wasn't great, but I wasn't in danger of getting fired either. I would make my quota one year, I would miss it the next, and I was making a good living, but I really wasn't a superstar. And in January of 2000, in our annual review, the state manager for that company at the time gave me two books. One was Dr. John C. Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And the second was a book by someone I'd never heard of in my life. It's a book called Endless Referrals by Bob Burg. And those two books, and I'm not underplaying this at all. Those two books, what I learned and then applied in my own career, it totally changed the direction of my business. My career began to take off. 2 years later, I went from a district manager to regional manager. 2 years after that, I went to the state manager position. And doing that in 4 years from kind of an average district to a President's Club qualifying state manager was kind of unheard of. And it's because of those two books and how I applied, especially with Bob's book, Endless Referrals, how it taught me to focus on how what I did benefited other people. Well, as my career took off like that, the state manager would have me come into the training school. We had training schools every month with new agents from across the state. And I would come in and I would speak to the group and I would tell a little bit about my story, literally going from a mobile home where the floor was falling out at spots to building a multi-million-dollar career. And I would talk to that new agent school, but I would always talk about those two books, and particularly Endless Referrals, because that was a more important book for the group that I was speaking with. And I've been talking about month to month, and it was just such a huge part of who I was. Well, while I was a regional manager, this would probably been about 2003, I'm guessing, 2002, 2003. I was in my regional office in Plano, Texas, and my administrator buzzes in and says, "You have a phone call." I said, "Who's it from?" And she said, "Somebody named Bob Burg." And I thought, yeah, right. My friends are pulling my leg on this one. There's no way I would get a call from Bob Burg. And so I answer the phone, and Bob, I know he's been on your show. He's got this positive vocal velocity that just really projects. And so I get on the phone. He says, "Hi, Jeff. This is Bob Burg." And I said, and I'm quoting myself, Sure it is, buddy.
Ah,
He said, excuse me? I said, is this really Bob Burg? He says, yeah, this is really Bob Burg. And I told him the story about what a difference the book had made in my career and how I'd been literally promoting that book every single month when I would talk to the training schools. And it began a friendship that started over a funny moment where I literally had to pull my foot out of my mouth and it was all the way up to my kneecap. and, but it started the friendship, and we ended up keeping in contact. I helped Bob get into a lot of speaking events for that company. He was calling me prospecting for speaking events, and
oh
I
my gosh.
helped make that happen across the country with the carrier that I was with, and he just did such a great job. It just began a friendship, and then back in 2000, late 2013, I had written my first book, The Unexpected Tour Guide. And Bob's the first person I was thinking, so I'm gonna send him a copy. And so I emailed him a copy and said, look, if you don't have time to read this, I certainly understand. I just wanted to get your thoughts. Is this something, is this worthwhile for me to pursue this? And his comments back were typical Bob Burg. So encouraging,
I know.
so wonderfully affirming. And
Yeah.
he gave me advice on the book. He gave me advice on speaking, and we've just it's just grown. And we've even done live events together in West Palm Beach, Florida, and in Jupiter, Florida, and so what began as me laughing, thinking my friends were pulling my leg, really ended up being a great change in my life.
Oh,
It really did.
that's incredible. I mean, the person, if it wasn't him, had to be a really good actor. As you know, his voice is just so Bob Burg. I mean, and then
It
to
is.
learn on my podcast that he was an anchor before or a news reporter before, I was like, okay, because his voice is so distinct. But that is a great story. So for people who don't know his book, Endless Referrals, share some highlights that you would coach to your employees when you were coaching. Bring out like five things or things that you would coach based on his book.
The biggest thing that I got from Bob, excuse me, that I got from Bob's book that I had never really, it never really crystallized for me before. And sales training that I went through young in my career always said you need to be focusing on how you help the other person. You need to be, well, you need to focus on their benefit. You need to focus on their benefit. And, I'd heard it time and time again, but it really didn't gel with me, I guess. And so I would go in and I was personable enough and I was hardworking enough that I would make a lot of calls, but it was more personality driven. It was more, oh gosh, it was more activity driven. And so the success I had came, but it wasn't because I was really good at the job. And when I read Endless Referrals, for some reason it clicked. And it was basically how Bob worded the things he taught about how you focus on the benefit to other people. And as you know, the Go Giver really was a parable written from kind of the content in Endless Referrals. And so I began to do that. And in my case, probably the biggest catalyst in what I would teach people later is how to generate referrals by, uh, by the way, Bob taught it as networking, but then I took it into my own client base. In networking, Bob teaches you how to network properly, and don't be there handing out your cards and trying to get everybody to have your card in their hand. Make it more about making connections between people, and it will come back your way. And he teaches a lot of questions to ask. But one of the questions that he teaches people to ask is he's getting to know them. He says, what questions do I need to be asking? What do I need to be looking for to know if someone that I run into is a good prospect for you, for me to send your way as a referral? Now I'm paraphrasing, but that was the idea. And he would listen and take answers, and he would really try to connect people. Well, I ended up doing that in one of my accounts. And with the insurance carrier I was with, we were basically employer payroll funded. We were an employee benefit program that they would add to their normal health insurance. And so I had set an appointment with one of my account owners in downtown Dallas at the time, up on the 23rd floor of a building. The guy owned a mortgage company, super nice fellow. And so I went in and I had studied very hard on what I'd learned in endless referrals. And so I kind of had a plan, but I went into that meeting and I said, first thing I want to do is I want to thank you. And he said, why? And I said, well, you're my client You're my customer. I feed my family by what I do for a living. You're part of that. I just want you to know I
Mhm.
appreciate you." And he said, "Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say that." I said, "Well," I said, "I want to take it one step further." He said, "What?" And I said, "I have a lot of other clients. I'm constantly prospecting and getting new clients to the table. What do I need to be looking for out there? What do I need to be asking these people to know if they would be a good referral for me to send your way?" And the first thing he did, Dave, is he took his glasses off. He laid them on his table. He says, "Well, I'll answer your question, but the first thing I'm going to do is thank you." And I said, "Why? I haven't done anything yet." He said, "Actually, you have." He said, "I've been in business 30 years. I've had salespeople ask me for referrals all the time. You are literally the first to ask how you could
Oh,
refer business to me. Thank you." And
that's
so
what.
it created what I later branded as a fusion point, that
Oh,
connection where you have positive emotional experiences connecting with logic. And it created a huge one for he and I. And so then he told me what I need to be asking because he was thinking about doing some mortgage-based products in companies for their employees. And so we talked a little bit, and I said, "Well, I've got an idea." I picked up my phone because I already had, I mean, I knew my clients. And once I understood
right.
what he was looking for, I picked up my phone. I called, ended up calling two people before I left. And I said to them, I told them, I said, "Hey, I've got a friend. He owns a mortgage company. He's someone that I know, I like, and I trust.
Uh-huh.
He's doing something new that I think you'd find interesting, and I would like your permission to make the connection. Would that be okay?" And he said, "Sure." I said, "Well, I said, this is his name. I'll give him your contact information. You can expect his call." And I did that twice. So I put it into action right there on the spot. It literally changed so much about the dynamics of how my district did their job, how the region then did its job. And I taught that
Wow.
even as a state. And so
Uh,
and the second thing really, I guess it got, go ahead, go ahead.
no, that's incredible. I love it. And then you just completely made it yours, and you took Bob's teaching, and then you just it's great. So no, give us number two.
Well, number two was as I grew in my speaking career, I continued doing exactly that same thing. Now, my branding, like I said, it's fusion points, engage the science of persistence, but it's all about working with the neurology of the brain and how people make decisions. And most salespeople, they don't realize this, but they will unintentionally cause their own problems. I'll say
Mm,
most. A lot of salespeople will, because what happens, the way we make decisions as humans, our brain will generate an emotion. That emotion will send a somatic marker down into our chest. We'll feel differently. If it's a
right.
negative emotion, like fear, mistrust, a sense of isolation, things of that nature, the somatic marker that it sends down our chest makes us feel uncomfortable. We push away, we push back. And I always liken it to how if you're watching a scary movie when you were a child or whatever, something startled you, that feeling, that's the somatic marker that I'm talking about. Now, fortunately, they're not all that intense. But when you have a negative emotion, you have a somatic marker to some level of like that. And then when that combines with logic, when you're making a decision that you face at the time, the decision is always no go. I'm going to push back. I'm not going to do this. But the opposite is true as well. When you have a positive emotional response, it still creates the somatic marker, but you like how that one feels. You want to repeat it. Hey, I can do this again. I like that. So when that combines with logic, the decision that's produced is to move forward. You're comfortable saying yes to the next step. Well, one of the biggest fusion points that I ever created with people was when, after again reading endless referrals, understanding how that focus on the benefit to others impacts what's going on in the moment. You know, in the Go Giver, it talks about how your influence is directly related to how much you focus on the benefit to others. And that's paraphrasing again. I love the book and I paraphrase it. But
Right, right.
anyway, but as I've grown in my own branding, I talk about as a sales professional, whether it's real estate, insurance, whatever, you have to be able to get your client to fully understand the value proposition. And for most companies, the term value proposition, even though they're very well intended, I think most companies kind of miss that because they think it's about something they do that's above and beyond the equation that they didn't have to do. It's a lot of things. It's how great they do this or that. And the truth is, a value proposition has nothing to do with the company. It has nothing to do with the product or service, and it even has nothing to do with how great the salesperson is. And I know your audience is wonderful. What it has to do with is how that other person's life changes, how it gets better in some way when they start a relationship with you. So in essence, it's their value from your proposition. And all of that still, even though I've been teaching that now as part of my training, it really grows out of things that I learned as basics that were labeled differently from Bob. And so
Right. So
it's
give
been
us
a
an
huge
example.
thing.
Give us the correct way to offer a value proposition. And you can take any
Okay.
career, any vocation.
Okay. I'll take an example. If the best way to uncover what the value proposition is and how to communicate that value proposition to the prospect is to design great questions that will focus them in that direction. When in all sales industries, there are certain things that you know ahead of time. Okay, if they're doing business with me, this is the benefit they're going to get from it. Like for example, in the employee benefits industry I was in, because I knew that if we made their benefit package better, I knew that they would attract a better quality worker in the hiring process. They would keep that worker, they'd become more loyal because their benefit package would be better than their competitors out there. And we would get them tax breaks. There was all kinds of things like that. Now, as a salesperson, in my early days of my career, I would tell them that. Well, that's okay because I know the information, but if you instead of telling that as a salesperson, you have to realize you're starting in unless you already have that know, like, and trust relationship with them, you're basically starting in a little bit behind. Because I know this is going to shock everybody, but most people, when they hear words coming out of a salesperson's mouth, if they don't know them well, they don't always assume it's exactly right. And it's just
Right.
part of the industry. And
Right.
so what I learned, instead of telling them that, I would develop questions and I would get them to tell me, like in the employee benefit arena, how I would do it in that genre is I would look at the employer and I'd say, with a lot of companies having to make some difficult budget decisions and either cutting back on their employee benefit programs or some of them even cutting them out completely, you've made the choice to offer the benefits. Let me ask you a question. Why do you go to the expense and the effort? And then they would tell me, well, I have to have a better employee benefits package than my competitor if I want to get that best worker. And they would go through all the things I would say. But because I'd asked that question, then what would happen is instead of it coming out of my mouth, it came out of their mouth, which made it the gospel truth. And I would
Exactly.
ask questions that got them to understand their value for my proposition because that's what I was going to do for them.
I love it. That's great. So, when in life did you realize that persistence wasn't just a skill, it was a survival tool? Was there a moment when giving up would have been easier?
Oh, yes. Oh, it's funny. And this is part of when I'm doing a keynote, this is part of what I talk about.
Oh, great.
The I had left the uniform industry that I was in. I had been unemployed for a little while, and then I started in the insurance industry, and it was commission only, and it was uh, I was struggling to get a handle on it. That's the best way to say it. And the struggle was internal because I'd been the number one salesman, the top three salesman in the nation with a uniform company I was with. I knew how to go out and do the work and make it happen. But I had felt so discouraged during the 18 months that I was with that company that bought us out, and it wasn't their fault, it was mine. But I laugh and tell people, I said, I was so broke at this point that I would have had to, if somebody had robbed me, all they would have gotten was practice. I didn't have anything for them to take. And I got advised to go bankrupt by an attorney. And I didn't go bankrupt for two very good reasons. Number one, I felt obligated to pay off the debt, which I
Mhm.
actually did later. But the second reason I didn't go bankrupt is that boy wanted $1,200 to file the paperwork, and I didn't have it. I was too broke to go bankrupt. So this is where I was starting in that career. And to back to your point of your question, I was struggling like crazy. I had to move my family. My children were 9 and 5 at the time. I had to move my family out of this nice middle class neighborhood into a mobile home I'm almost exaggerating to call it a mobile home. It was that bad.
Wow.
And it was a bad situation. And then I won't go through all the details, but their bicycles that they had were still at the other house and they were given away. And I couldn't go get them back and I didn't have money to go buy them a bicycle.
Oh,
And the day I had to tell them that, I literally I went out on the front porch of that mobile home and I stood for 45 minutes, I guess. Maybe it seemed like forever. And it was
Right.
raining and I just couldn't go back in the house. They had already stopped crying. I mean, kids are kids. They had
Yeah.
already stopped crying, but I couldn't stop crying. And
Right.
that was the day that I made the strongest fusion point that I'll ever have. It's when I realized that what I did for a living was to feed those baby girls.
Mm.
And I couldn't let anything else get in the way of that. And it's like I drew a line in the sand, no more. And you'll hear people talk about uh, finding their why. Well, think back on that day on that mobile home. If my story had ended there, if I had quitting, I made up a new word. That's that North Georgia background I was telling you about. If I had quit, uh, the story would have been different. My girls' stories would have been different. But
Right.
instead, I used it and I said, no more. And I got stubborn. And they say an alcoholic has to hit bottom before they work their way up. And I've never had to deal with that particular challenge. But if I needed a humbling in my spirit, it was that day.
Wow.
But from that point forward, I said, no more. And I found my strongest fusion when it was my girls. And so every call I made out in the marketplace, before I would go in, Debbie, this was back in the days of Daytimer. I would look at my Daytimer, which had pictures of my girls in it, and I would look at them and I'd go make a sales call. And if I had a sales conversation coming up, before I went in to make that presentation, I would look at my pictures of my girls, and then I would go in. And it gave me such fire in my spirit. And I'd like to say that everything just went perfect after that, and it didn't, but it still got a lot better. And
Right.
I think that next year was probably my first year making a six-figure income, and it just began to take off a bit after that. And so it's
That's
it's
incredible.
it's an emotional thing for me, but that's where that hit for me.
Well, we're going to go to a quick commercial break and then we're going to come back and talk about storytelling, the power of storytelling. We'll be right back with Jeff C. West.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical. Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Welcome back to Mastering the Art of Success. We are here with Jeff C. West. He is an incredible author, storyteller, speaker, amazing salesperson, and just a kind person. I can tell by just speaking with you today. So I want to dive into some of your books. So you can start whichever one you want to start with. And then I want to talk about the importance of storytelling. I'm just finishing my book, The Mindset in Motion Method, and a lot of storytelling throughout that book. So please tell us a little bit about that and how you found success being an author.
Oh, thank you. And I can't wait to read your book. I'm looking forward to that. Make sure that I'm in the loop when you do that.
Thank
But
you.
for me, the first book that I wrote was actually just by myself. and it was The Unexpected Tour Guide. And I'd always loved reading business parables. I can't tell you how many books I've read over the years, but it's a lot. I'll just leave it at that. But the business parable, especially for sales training, leadership training, that kind of thing, it was something I loved. So my first book was actually a sales parable. It was called The Unexpected Tour Guide, and it was a story that centered around a young salesman in Houston who was in the employee benefits arena. Go figure. But he he was struggling, and he meets a homeless man, and it totally changed his perception. Someone described it to me once as this is like uh, same kind of different as me meets It's a Wonderful Life. And if you know those two books, of course, I felt like that was a high compliment. But the thing that I think I loved most about that book, other than being my first, two things. Number one, my wife, when I gave her the manuscript, I was nervous because it was the first
Oh,
time I'd written a book. I had written a lot of other things, but not books. And she read it. The first night she read the first chapter or two and then went on to sleep. The next night she starts back in on it. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I get an elbow to the ribs and she says, "Wake up." And I said, "What?" And she said, "I couldn't put this down. And if I can't sleep, you can't either." Okay, that was a
oh,
score. All right, I like that. But
amazing.
the second thing I loved about that book is I was able to write into the story the character of a man that I worked for, my first sales job. He's literally one of the finest human beings I'd ever met in my life, and the example he set for me and how a father should love his children was incredible. And
Oh,
I wrote him into the book, and he gave me permission to use his name. The guy's name was Jack Amberson, and he just made such a huge difference in my life. But then I got scared. That book, I sold several thousand copies, and I was using it when I would travel and speak, and I was speaking a lot back then. And I was scared to write the second one, and that's just the honest truth. I was doing a lot of blog posts, a lot of other things, but another book, a little scary for me. And I became friends with Bob's co-author on The Go-Giver, John David Mann. John has written over 40 books, 9 New York Times bestsellers,
wow.
and I had gotten to know him through the relationship with Bob. And John was coming down. He was in Texas on a book signing tour, so I drove up to Waco, Texas, a couple hours away, and I had lunch with him. And his business model, a lot of now he's working on a novel that's just his, but his business model primarily has been co-authoring with people. That's what he did with Bob, and he'll be the lead writer, but the co-author and the lead writer are always communicating and making things happen. And I wanted to do that, so I picked his brain about that, and it gave me some confidence. And so I decided to reach out to someone that I had met, another acquaintance through Bob, oddly enough. There's a lady named Lisa Wilber, and Lisa is Avon's fourth highest producer in history. I mean, the lady's
Wow.
had a team of thousands of people, and it's done really well. And we were on a Zoom call that was something in the Go Giver Success Alliance back then. And she had blue hair. She had dyed her hair blue to do something fun with her kid. And now she's on this call, and it's international, and she felt the need to explain her blue hair, and so she got the camera, and she said it was explaining why she had done it, and she says, "But you know what? If you ever want to stop being so judgmental in your life, dye your hair blue. This is working for me." She said, "I can be in a grocery store and think that lady's skirt's too short," said the lady with the blue hair. Well, I typed into the chat. I said, "Lisa, that would make a great book title." And she
Oh my
never
God.
did it. But when I had decided to add co-authoring to my business model, then I reached out to her and she said yes immediately. And so we wrote a book called Said the Lady with the Blue Hair, 7 Rules for Success in Direct Sales. And so it was basically what she taught her team. And that did well. Bob and I wrote Streetwise Sales. When Bob and I wrote Streetwise, this is so funny. He had sent me an email back in fall of 22. And Bob and I would communicate about sales things a lot anyway. And he was going to put something on LinkedIn, and he wanted to know my thoughts on it. But the last sentence of his email says, "By the way, save this. When you and I write our parable, this could come in handy." We'd never discussed writing a parable, not even one word about it. So I
Wow.
answered his question and I said, "And by the way, if you're serious, oh, heck yes, we're doing this parable." And so that's what we were using some of Bob's material on becoming objection proof. And when so we decided we were going to do it. And my wife and I were sitting in New Orleans. We were about to leave a restaurant. It was late afternoon, and we were up on the balcony looking out at the street. And the waitress comes by. She says, "Oh, you guys are about to have a treat." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Look down at the street." And there was a young busker getting ready to sing. And the girl was just incredible. She says, "She is so good. You're going to enjoy this." My wife and I sat there for another hour just having Chianti and watching her sing. And so I looked at my wife after it's over and I said, "The entire storyline to the parable Bob and I are going to do just came to mind. I know exactly how I'm going to treat this." And so that became Streetwise to Saleswise, become objection proof and beat the sales blues. And it's set in New Orleans. And the feel of New Orleans is written in the book. I've had people who grew up there and said, "Did you used to live there? This is so much how it feels to live in New Orleans." And I had a young salesperson. Well, he wasn't a salesperson. I had a young man. I call him I'll call him a smart aleck for your show because I don't know how far we should go with that. But he wisecracks his way out of a job in the very beginning of the book and has to take a career in sales and doesn't know what he's doing. And so we take him from not knowing a darn thing in sales through his first year and becoming successful. And so
So
that
stop.
one did well.
Give us some highlights because there's so many nuggets in all these books. Give us some highlights of your book here with Bob Burg.
The young man, his name is Thaddeus Tucker, and he's our protege in the book, and he has to learn what he's doing in sales. And we have a mentor, his name's Andre, and it's a sales manager. But we teach leadership lessons with Andre. We teach fusion points in the book with Andre and how he's working with Thaddeus, and then we teach the sales process A to Z through Thaddeus. And we teach him some life lessons because he becomes friends with a busker, and she just kicked his rear one day because of something he did, and we write that into it. I My goal, Debbie, when I write a book is I want to write the fiction that's so darn strong that even if people weren't learning anything, they'd want to read
Right.
that book. And so I've got that in there. It's basically it's good sales lessons, prospecting, having that sales conversation, how you get referrals, how you work in situations where your competitors are promising things that you know your company will never agree to do, and you're not sure that theirs will, but you can't just say, "Hey, they'll never do that." That's wrong. So we've taught lessons all the way through the process, and I also it's a habit of mine, but I tend to make personal relationships a big part of the story. It's just what I like to do, and so I
Absolutely.
kind of worked that out with Thaddeus and the busker a little bit. And it's just been so much fun, and that led me to Bill Gates. The
Okay.
latest book it came out in September is called "The Hidden Heist: Stop Robbing Yourself of Lasting Wealth." It's my first entree into a world that's not just sales related and leadership related. This is everybody related, and
Mm,
because it's a financial parable, and it's designed to teach the money mindsets and help destroy some of the money myths that keep people from succeeding. Because, quite frankly, there's a lot of things we learn growing up that
mm.
keep us from becoming successful financially. Especially, like if you grow up in a family where people think rich people are greedy and dishonest and all that, it's going to be really hard for you to achieve success financially because you can't become something you don't think is good without having a
Right.
real dichotomy of spirit there. So we teach a lot of money myths and we destroy those, and then we teach some really good financial habits. But I set the entire story in the middle of a bank robbery. The first
Oh,
line of the book is "Everybody on the floor,"
I
and
love
it's got
your business and your fiction. It's amazing. It's very entertaining. It's,
it's just my goal. And the characters in this one, it's tension and then it's funny, and people will tell me they're laughing out loud as they read it. It's got good solid teaching in it. It's got a few twists that nobody will see coming because that's what I like to do. And Bob described it best. He said it's a Netflix thriller meets the only money guide you'll ever need.
now I understand his quote after I read it earlier when introducing you. That's incredible. Well, you created, I mean, I can't wait to read all the books, but so tell us about your trademarked fusion points, how it blends emotional connection with the brain's decision-making process, and then give us some examples. And if you use real estate, I've been in real estate 35 years, so if you can put it in
Okay.
that perspective.
Sure. The whole idea of fusion points came out of my research that I did as soon as I began speaking, as soon as I retired from the insurance industry. And I wanted to know the answer to a question that had perplexed me and every other sales leader across the country, quite frankly, if your team's on commission sales, which obviously includes real estate, is how could you take two people who on paper, it looks pretty identical. They should both go out there and be very successful at what they're doing. And yet one decides to do what it takes and they become very successful. And the other decides to quit. And I wanted to know how those decisions get made. So it led me to the works of a gentleman named Dr. Antonio Damasio. He was a professor at USC and an adjunct professor at Salk Institute, and he was a professor of neurology. And he's done a lot of work on how the brain works when you're making decisions. And so that led to me understanding, okay, when people are making these decisions, it's the emotional connection with logic, and it's about what emotion is in charge at the time. And so I understood all that. And then I branded it a little bit later as I began teaching it. But what it amounts to is in the sales process in real estate, in insurance, in car sales, it doesn't really matter. Whatever you're doing, even as an entrepreneur, if you don't consider yourself a salesperson, you still have to sell. And you have to develop a team that can do that as well in most cases. But the whole idea is you want to intentionally work with the neurology of the brain in making helping your prospect make the decision to comfortably take that next step. And so there's ways to do it before you even meet them, like what I teach realtors and what I'll teach salespeople pretty much in any industry is you can literally make fusion points. You can create this positive emotional response in a prospect who's never met you. You do it through several ways. I teach a process in prospecting where I call it priming the pump, where you can send that person some meaningful things to them that mean something in their industry that are helpful to them before you ever ask for the first meeting. And you do that. I teach doing that 3 times, and then you ask for the first meeting. And what happens is because uh, you've started that positive emotional response when you ask for that first meeting, basing it on the logic of their value from your proposition. The logic meets the positive emotion, and your appointment ratio becomes much higher. You can also do that with a referral. When you get an introduction to a prospect from someone who already know, like, and trust,
Hmm.
what happens is you're not just borrowing that know, like, and trust relationship. They've had fusion points. No, they don't know what it's called, but they've had positive emotional experiences combining with logic with that person. So when you get that introduction, you're borrowing that fusion point. And when you when you intentionally create multiple experiences that involve that positive emotional response with the logic of whatever you're trying at the time, you're making it where it's not you're not manipulating them. You're making where they're comfortable taking that next step, and that's the whole goal with it. That's the way you build a great organization. That's the way a real estate broker should build the relationship with their realtors. There's just so many ways that comes in. And when I'm writing a book, I'm intentionally creating fusion points with the reader because I know that way they'll retain the lessons inside.
Right.
If I just told the lessons, yeah, some people will get it because I've written nonfiction material before, and I know, yeah, I can explain that, and they should understand it. But if I tell them a story that pulls them in, if they get to cheering for a Thaddeus Tucker, or they get
Right.
attached, yeah, they get attached to one of the bank robbers in the Hidden Heist, and then they learn the lesson as that person learns it. It's like they're living it with. And when you can do that in your sales process, when your sales conversation itself is focused on how their life's going to get better, and you ask questions that they're telling you a lot of these things as well, their comfort level with you goes so high that it just becomes crazy how well it works. And it's because you're focused on providing value to them. You're not focused on you. The more you focus on you, the less likely they are to buy from you. But the more you focus on them and how their world changes, and then if you can back up what you're saying so your product or your service is great for them, your sales career will get really big.
That's incredible. I love that. I've never really heard that, mixing the story with the lesson, and that is a great way to storytell. So every author has a moment when a book surprises them. What surprised you most while writing Hidden Heist or your Fusion Points material?
Stick with the Hidden Heist on this one, and it
Okay.
was it will be uh, the part that I loved the most about that book was the story arc. I'm not going to tell you everything in there because there's some spoilers I would give away by that, but it's a story arc built in to one of the bank robbers. And in the mix of all this, what surprised me was two things. Number one, I knew where I wanted to start the guy, and I knew where I was going to finish.
Wow.
But the part in the middle is a little difficult because I threw in some things that where he couldn't talk. He literally he could talk a little bit, but very minimal. And so the entire storyline for his arc, not the entire, but a lot of it, is from his thoughts. And
Oh,
so the
wow.
reader is getting an inside his head view out. And the way that it works so well, Bill Cates, my co-author, he's huge in the financial advisor industry. Bill has written, gosh, I guess 7 or 8 books that are they're topical nonfiction about generating referrals. Bill and Bob, similar names, are the two best sources on referrals. But Bill, uh, I think he's got like 50,000 financial advisors that follow him closely.
Wow.
And when he's speaking, he says, I've literally helped thousands of financial advisors bring in billions of dollars worth of business. And so he's really good at what he does. But watching him because in the storyline, that was my job. We're doing material from him. We brainstorm the story ideas, but then it's my job to produce it.
Okay.
And there to hear him now quoting some of the
Oh,
things that we talked about in the book just thrills me. And he was on Fox up in Washington D.C. It was the local Fox affiliate up there getting interviewed on it, and I was watching it, and it just thrilled me.
oh,
But seeing things that he loves out of it, there's so many benefits I've been blessed with by doing the writing, uh, and that's one of them, I guess. So.
incredible. What an incredible journey you've been on. So, two questions. We're about to wrap it up. Number one, what would you tell your 20 or 25-year-old self now that you're here today?
I would probably tell that 20-year-old Jeff, buy Apple. But then I was kind of a dodo. I'd have probably come back with a box of fruit. But I think what I would tell myself if I could go back in time and do that now is don't get discouraged. Keep after what you're doing. Uh, you will find that you can't hide hard work in any business, especially sales. And I was willing to outwork most people. And then when I finally learned how to do it right, it was even better. So that's probably what I would do there, I guess.
Love it. And then the last question, you said you had a gift for our audience, something about Jumpstart.
Yes. For the part of your audience that is in sales, I have a little thing I do when I'm on a show that I'll give away. It's my Fusion Points Jumpstart, and it's just a way to teach you how to attract clients in the Fusion Points fashion, help you kind of establish some of those things. And if you go to jeffcwest.com/jumpstart, you can sign up. It puts you on my email list. If you don't want to stay on it, unsubscribe. But I do two on my email list. I do a weekly coaching series, goes out twice a week, and then I'll do some behind the scenes author stuff. But it's 4 videos there that will help give you a pretty good concept, and it's geared toward prospecting in the early stages of a sales relationship. And but anyway, that'll be my gift to you. And I'm even wearing my Christmas shirt. You notice this today? So Merry Christmas.
Well, this has been just an incredible, I can't wait to share this with all of my agents and the people I mentor. You've just been so invaluable. I'm going to be signing up right now, and I wish you a happy holiday and wonderful time with those two cute girls that they'll always be in my mind as 5 and 9.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Debbie. It's been an honor and a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Tune in each week for another episode of Mastering the Art of Success with host Debbi DiMaggio. Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern. Real stories, real strategies, real success.